Okay, my name is Sarra Tlili. I teach at the University of Florida. I teach Arabic literature and Arabic language. I do my research on animal studies. I have written a book on animals in the Qur'an where I try to propose a non-anthropocentric reading of the Qur'an. Basically, I argue that are not, like God's favorite in the Qur'an, and that the Qur'an you know like like it's although it speaks to humans, it is about humans, of course, but it does in fact speak a lot more favorably about non-human beings than it does about human beings. This does not mean that the Quran seeks to condemn humanity, but rather to transform humanity. And for me, like, one of the ways the Quran tries to do that, one way, it's not like the only way or the perhaps the major way, but it's in a way to lift them up to the level of other creatures. This is the kind of the core of my argument in this book, but I also try to make it in other works as well. What I try to do is to analyze the major notions that have traditionally been used to argue for human exceptionalism in the Quran. Like, after I introduce animal theories in general, like the modern discourse about animal ethics, which I use to kind of frame my work and provide, like some foundation for my ideas. I also rely on the genre of tafsir or Quranic exegesis, so I introduce that as well. After that, I move to I have chapters for notions like tasghir, for example, what is traditionally known as the subjugation of the non-human creation to humans, right? This is one of the arguments that have been traditionally used to, to argue that humans are God's favorite, for example. I provide a lexical, contextual analysis of this term, for example, trying to show that this is not what it is about. For example, tasghir is really about adapting the world to humans' needs, but not just to humans' needs, and it is also to other creatures' needs. I have also a chapter about, I talk about like the notion of tafdil, for example, which is usually translated as preferment, or, like the idea that humans are God's favorite or God's preferment. I also try to show that this is not the case, and I do this through lexical analysis and discuss what Muslim exegetes have to say about this. I discuss the notion of taklif, or the idea that imposing on humans certain moral obligations, and I argue that perhaps this does not seem to be something that is unique to humans in the Quran. There are indications that non-human beings may have their own form of taklif, mainly because there is also afterlife resurrection for non-human beings. The Quran speaks about, or seems to hint, that non-human beings have afterlife resurrection. I also have, the last chapter actually of my book is about humans' status in the Quran. The idea that humans are God's favorite is based on a number of things, including, for example, a verse in Surah At-Tin which says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. I go through all of these ideas and try to show that, in fact, these interpretations are founded on a selective approach to the Quran. Like in the case of this verse, for example, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. The following verse says, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. So we created the human being in the best image, but then we turned him into the lowest of the low. I look at what Muslim exegetes have to say about this, and they don't, there are many interpretations for this. It's not just like that humans are better than other creatures, for example. And I look at the context of the Quran. It does not look like, the Quran uses this to kind of promote human exceptionalism. I also look at the word insan in Quran, which has a surprisingly negative connotation. Like in most cases, when the word insan is used in the Quran, it evokes very in like negative connotations, such as, the insan is ظلوم, extremely unjust, or jahul, extremely haughty, or and the Quran consistently uses superlatives in describing the human being. Kafar, like extremely ungrateful, for example. So I look at all of these instances and try to analyze them. Again, my aim is not to show that the Quran condemns the human being, because the Quran also uses the word ibad. So it seems to be saying that the human being becomes a better creature when it is connected to God, rather than, like not in the neutral state of being human, basically. What is quite interesting for me, and this is like the conclusion that I reach, is that that connection to God is not unique to the human being. The Quran affirms that, وَمَا مِن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ. There is not a creature except that it is praising praising God, right? So all creatures are in fact connected to God. Also, the Quran affirms that the entire creation has submitted itself to God in Surah Al-Imran. وَلَهُ أَسْلَمَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. So all creatures, have submitted themselves to God. And what is the aim or the purpose of the Quran is to invite humanity to submit itself to God. So I think from these chapters, from these analyses, and I hope what I feel like is a holistic look at the Quran, we discover that humans are not necessarily God's favorite. I mean, they do have a chance of earning that status. That's true. But it's not a given. It's not a given, right? Even when the Quran speaks about privileges that are given to humans, it's not because God loves them more. It's rather because he is testing them in this world, right? So, yeah. So after I looked at the status of animals, I would like to explore the concrete dimension of animal ethics in Islam. The Quran seems to be more about the status, like it emphasizes the spirituality of the non-human world and all of that. To go to the concrete dimension, I'm looking at the Hadith, which speaks about the status of human and non-human beings, but also about the concrete dimension, how we are supposed to treat animals, right? And also like the larger traditions. So I would like also to look at the legal texts and see what they have, like the various kind of positions toward the animal in various legal sources, especially according to the different schools of law. Also, I would like to look at the culture, the Muslim culture regarding the animal. There is a lot of, textual evidence, at least, showing that Muslims prior to the modern period were quite attentive to the well-being of non-human animals. This is not to romanticize the tradition or to say that there are no, problems. There are definitely problems, and I hope I will spell them out. But overall, there was this culture of attention and kindness to animals that was prevalent in the Muslim world. And this has changed in the modern period for a number of reasons. One of them, for example, is urbanization. One of we have the entire humanity has now become distant from the natural world, Muslims included. Also, notions about health, notions about cleanliness, notions about a good number, the nation state, many of the functions that used to be performed by animals are no longer performed by animals. They are now performed, now the police takes care of security. This used to be the job of dogs, and so on and so forth. So I want to kind of trace the cultural changes in Muslims' attitudes toward animals, especially compare the pre-modern period to the modern period. My aim here is, first of all, to say or to argue that the tradition at large, this includes scriptural sources, but also cultural practice and, other textual sources. The tradition at large has developed a sensical and, successful animal ethic in the pre-modern period. And this is an ethic that is worth maintaining. Like it may be improved here and there, but overall, it is a serious ethic. But also, I want to kind of, it's like there is an element of advocacy there. I'm hoping to revive this ethic among Muslims. I feel that Muslims' attitudes toward animals and the environment in general have deteriorated in the modern world. But I know that there are many, like well-meaning Muslims. All they need is to discover, to know what our sources say about animals, right? And I would like to share that with them, with the hope to inspire them to do better with animals. So because this ethic is disappearing, and unless we do something about it, like it will not be recovered. So I'm hoping to be part of the, like endeavor to recover that ethic.